So the idea of the Arundel Heritage Conversations is to situate the wine that we're making in this place, Arundel County, Maryland, and this period of time. The experts that we've invited to join us at the Vineyard Dinners are geologists, climatologists, historians, archaeologists, anthropologists, and they are helping us to understand our past, our present, and our future. We're very fortunate to have Terry Smith, a well-known journalist, host this series.
I think, first of all, a little thanks to Tom and to Polly for putting on this wonderful dinner, and to Jean-Louis for the dinner. Pretty great, I think. I've been selected here because I know nothing about any of the topics that Polly just ticked off there, but Bubba does. So the best way to introduce Ernest Beasly, whose nickname is Bubba, is to have him explain to us who he is and how he got the name Bubba.
Well, I'm Ernest William Beasly the fourth, so therefore they call me Bubba. I actually got into geology as a child. I collected rocks as a kid. Well, I didn't realize that it could actually turn into something that I would end up doing as a career. But long story short, I got a degree in geology and fell in love with the wine industry and immediately saw the connection between geology and wine. I worked in tasting rooms for a few years. I've worked in environmental consulting, and now I'm an independent consultant, and I do a lot of groundwater work, environmental work, and work with a lot of vineyards. And it's been a lot of fun.
Tell us a little about the geology of first the mid-Atlantic and then maybe where we are.
I guess the simplest and most concise way to think about the formation of the mid-Atlantic, and I'm talking about the eastern United States, is the land formed as a series of collisions. So you can think of continents colliding and accumulating more and more land mass with repeated collisions. And I'm talking very slow collisions over hundreds of millions of years until we basically end up with the present day accumulation of rocks that we have up and down the East Coast. And we happen to be in a period of calm, tectonic calm. There are no mountain building events going on the East Coast at this point.
But we had an earthquake.
Yes, we did.
What, a year ago?
3 years ago?
3 years ago now? Seems like yesterday. So how is that tectonic quiescence?
Well, we really are in a period of tectonic quiescence. The big earthquake that happened over Mineral, Virginia in 2011 was movement over an inactive fault.
Bring it down to Anne Arundel County, to where we are, to where we're sitting.
Well,
what's the geology under us and that has formed this place?
As I mentioned, we're in a period of tectonic quiescence. There's no continents colliding here on the East Coast. So, we have this very still inactive time, geologically speaking. So basically what this has allowed is for the mountains to the west of us, up on the Blue Ridge, to erode and deposit a wedge of sediments to the east. We're in the coastal plain province, which is underlain by a thick wedge of sediments that gets thicker and thicker the further east you move. And those are sediments that are basically being washed off of the mountains to the west, for lack of a better...
And in the charts that you had downstairs, in the poster, if you saw it, quite a difference between what I guess you could call the Piedmont, the coastal plain, and then the eastern shore.
Yes. Basically, the rocks express themselves in 5 physiographic provinces, and this is how geoscientists have sort of classified it. Here in Maryland, we have the 5 physiographic provinces: the Appalachian Plateau, or the Allegheny Plateau, the Valley and Ridge Province, the Blue Ridge Province, the Piedmont, and the coastal plain. So we basically are on the province that in order to hit rock, you'd have to drill down a couple thousand feet. And
Here.
And what this all means for wine growing is basically different conditions in different areas. So the geology directly affects the landscape and the soils, which is going to directly affect the wine. And it's not a, go ahead.
Well, how does it affect the wine? We know the climate,
Yes.
obviously, affects wine. Tell us how the soil, what is absorbed? How does it affect the wine?
Well, there's a lot of different ways that it can affect the wine, but basically, very commonly, widely reported, the number one soil property for quality wine growing is drainage. The geology, or the rocks, or the lack of rocks, directly influences the soil properties. So you can end up with areas with very poor drainage, areas with very good drainage, based on the geology. So the number one important factor for a wine growing site is good drainage.
Yeah, compare this site here, Dodon, with other wine growing regions. What's similar, what's different?
Well, that's one of the things that's so much fun about the wine growing in the Mid-Atlantic is that each site is so unique. There are similarities as far as the time that the soils formed, the processes that form the soils, but we really are truly in a unique geologic setting. And what that means is, here at Dodon, they have the capabilities to produce truly unique wines. As Tom mentioned earlier, the shell layer 20 feet down, that is actually a really cool little piece of the puzzle. There's this quality that limestone soils are very famous for, like this flinty minerality expression in the wine, and you can taste it. Limestone soils in different parts of the world, and the shells that Tom was talking about are actually made of the same mineral as limestone, calcium carbonate. Some of the limestone in the right bank of Bordeaux is actually thick shells of oyster beds. If you look at pictures of it, it's just these, conglomerations of oyster beds. So that's a really interesting piece of the puzzle. We may be seeing some of that limestone minerality in the site here, when in fact there's not limestone, but the same mineral exists.
Right. And didn't you get a chance today to go out and test the soil, and what did you find?
Well, I took my hand auger out. Tom and I took a walk in the vineyard and took my hand auger out and put a couple holes in the ground. Good drainage, really good soil texture, a lot of gravelly horizons, which is great for the drainage. And one interesting thing, and I kind of knew what to expect coming into it, because I've done a little, this was my first time putting a hole in the vineyard here, but I've read up on the soils. There's actually an official Dodon soil series that's acknowledged by the USGS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is basically the federal agency that for the soil conservation. It used to be called the Soil Conservation Service, but they've classified a unique soil series, and this is the type location. So there are other soil series up and down the east that they call the Dodon series, and that series was actually described here. So that was really neat. When I did my homework and I looked up the official series description and I read all about it, and I went out and put a hole in the ground, and it's exactly what I saw. Very cool.
So Polly and Tom, you have your own dirt, and it's named after Dodon. So that's pretty special.
Yeah.
Here's a really unfair question. This is your glass of wine.
Yes, sir.
Taste it and tell me, can you taste the soil? What can you derive by the taste from what you found today when you put an auger into the ground? I mean, that's
a really interesting question. The number one thing that jumps out to me about this glass of wine is the intensity of it. And you would not be able to achieve that on a site with poor drainage. I mean, that's the number one thing that jumps out at me about this glass of wine, from a geologic point of view.
And it's quite good. We have a couple minutes, so we're not going to go on long here at all, but if anybody has a question, right here.
Yeah, I have a question. How does I'm not from the East Coast, but how's the weather challenges in the East Coast differ from, say, Napa Valley in terms of consistency?
We live in a very humid area. So growers fight vigor. Too much water, too much leggy vine, and not enough concentration on the fruit. That's a big one. Also, we've got a lot of problems with mildew and fungus that they don't have in the West because of the moist conditions.
Here. And the dryness there.
Not Dodon, East Coast.
Yeah, no, I understand. Mid-Atlantic especially.
That's one of the challenges.
But they are now, I have read, making wine in virtually every state of the Union.
I believe it.
So there's every conceivable type of weather to be factored in. Anybody else?
Eric, maybe I can address?
Yes, Tom.
Part of that answer. So, one other difference with Napa is the temperature. Napa is hot and dry, and they ripen much earlier. There's differential ripening. So you get, in that hot, dry climate, you get riper sugars, you get more sugar faster, and you get more fruity flavors than what we get here, which is actually slightly cooler, even though you wouldn't mostly believe it. It's slightly cooler. We get more skin ripening, so we get more nuanced flavors, more spices, more herbs, a lot of different flavors than what you'll get out of the Napa Valley. The other thing that I wanted to mention about the rain, we have an excess of water here. Napa's too dry, and a little bit too wet. Many of you will have noticed when we came in, the grass was long. And if you go in between the rows, the grass is long to every other row. You have to cut the weeds at some point, but we try to, in a wet year like this, we're letting the grass grow because it helps whip the water out of the ground, which also contributes to the intensity. It's really about the way we farm that allows us to achieve these wines.
A couple more quick ones.
The question is, how deep do the roots go, and how long will it take them to reach the 20-foot depth to hit that layer? And will they go through it? What's beneath it?
A lot depends on the age of the vines, the farming practices. I was in a talk with some French soil scientists not too long ago, Claude and Lydia Bourguignon, who told me that they have seen a grapevine 75 meters, putting a root down 75 meters. Now this was a really old vine, and this was a total exception. They don't normally root that deep, but it wouldn't be unheard of for a.
How deep do you root them?
Well, we don't know yet. They're not all the way down there.
But I mean, typically, what would you expect?
So the deepest vine that I've ever seen, we were in the caves underneath the limestone caves, the limestone quarries under Saint-Emilion recently. And there were grapevine roots coming down. We were 30 feet underground, and there were grapevine roots coming out of the limestone.
Wow.
So we've been in soil pits. We've done soil pits here, and we'll do them again. But we did them several years ago, and the vines were already 3 or 4 feet down with our little backhoe. We were at Black Ankle recently, a couple of years ago, and they had a bigger backhoe, and their vines were 8 or 10 feet down. So it's really typical that they'll go down. Because Bubba said there are farming practices that we use to try and encourage that.
So they really do get impacted by that limestone we were referring to there.
Yes.
Right. Jenna.
My one question was about iron, because a lot of us dig wells around here.
Yeah.
And what comes up is a lot of iron. And when we were in the Dodon, after 15 years, the vines got down to that iron section, and that made their wine. So I'm just wondering if you have no iron here, or just what?
Oh, I'm sure there's iron in the soils.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that make a difference, I wonder?
I wouldn't expect that it would. Oxidized iron is pretty much done what it's going to do chemically in the environment.
One thing that we like to see is that the iron is red as deep as we've dug it there. And what that means is that oxygen is getting that deep. Now, remember a hurricane a few years ago, and the soil was completely saturated. No oxygen gets to those roots, and those roots need oxygen as much as we do. So we like to see that oxygen is getting down on the ground.
Is there a layer of clay at some point here in our region?
Oh, I hit clay out in the vineyard. Just a little lens of clay. Yeah, they're all over the place. Yeah, and that's, just one of the complications of of the soils,
That's our little gift from the Susquehanna coming down in the Delta. Anybody else, and we'll wrap it up. So give Bubba Beasly a hand.